Hi, friends. My name is Julianna Bright, and this is Fierce Sincerity. And you join me at the beginning of what I hope will be a series of conversations about animism, spirit work, and creativity. Today, I'm in conversation with Stephen Jenkinson, author, cultural activist, and the founder, along with his wife, Nathalie Roy, of the Orphan Wisdom School in Ontario, Canada. And today, we're in conversation about punk, elderhood, and his new book, Matrimony, Ritual, Culture, and the Heart's Work. I hope you enjoy it. I thought I would start by saying why I reached out to you in the first place, which was in the wintertime. I had it suddenly in my mind that I wanted to have a conversation with you about punk rock of all things.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So often, Stephen, when I'm reading your work or I'm listening to you speak, it feels like it animates the longings and the heart and the passions and the grief that I think first found a home for me when I was drawn to those margins and found that community. And I wrote a note to Khadija at the time, kind of introducing this, and I thought I might just read a little bit from that because it seems to give a little bit of a foundation. And I do very much want to talk about your book, your beautiful book, on matrimony. And part of part of what I'm thinking is that there's a way that those two topics meet. If punk is in some way a movement in a different direction than the overculture, then it strikes me that matrimony is a fairly punk topic. But but if you don't mind, I'm going to read just a little bit from this note, and then we can open it up. And I'll just jump in kind of in the middle. There's a conversation I'm longing to have with Stephen. It's about punk rock of all things, about the longings at the heart of that subculture and how I see them cross over with spirit work. So often when I'm reading Stephen's work or listening to him speak, it feels like the soul of punk to me, or what it aspired to be. Here's a little background if it helps. I came up musically through the punk scene when I was a young woman. I'm 54 now. I began playing drums in bands, then singing behind the drums, then writing songs. I still identify with the longings that drew me to those margins, and for this reason still call myself a punk. But I don't think we punks hold on to this badge merely because we're in love with our own outsider status, though, mercy, this can be a factor. These people who I love so much, despite their snobbery and sometimes slavish coolness, are also the most beauty-sensitive, poetic souls I know. We were the black sheep growing up who, for our keen ways of observing, were often pathologized or made the punchline. We were cultural strays who couldn't locate ourselves in the cheery fiction of the West. And the music and art was an act of protest, yes, but also a petition for a more beautiful and just world. And of course, we were orphans, every one of us, utterly without elders. Still in those squats and basements, in our grotty tour vans and group houses, we were searching for something holy, I think. Indeed, we were. So back to this conversation I'm longing to have with you. Over last
Great, by the
year,
way.
well, you're liking it so far.
That's great. Yeah, it's absolutely great. Yeah.
Cool. I started receiving last year a kind of not so subtle call to action about ministering in some kind of way to my punk brethren and sistren, to find the courage to talk about spirit work with this beloved community of mine, so many of whom are parents of grown children now and still searching for their own. So many who've lost their heart to build a different kind of world. I'll stop the letter there, but I own a Barnhart Dictionary of Etymology because of you. And on a hunch, I had a look at what's been recorded on the word punk. It's pretty good. You ready?
What you got?
Noun, 1687, American English, rotten wood used as tinder, so fire starter. Probably borrowed from Algonquin. Ponk, literally living ashes. So I guess I heard a bit of a provocation in that. And I kind of wanted to invite you to breathe on that ember. Tell me what you thought about that.
About the first etymology you came up with?
That etymology, and I think what I'm sort of bringing forward, this way that I feel like I'm longing to bridge the longings that drew me to punk and spirit work.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I would encourage you to allow the possibility that the connection is not readily available. Mm. And for all of that may not be weak as a result of that. May not be. It may be what it's supposed to be, which is waiting to see, you could say. Mm. I mean, these are, okay, so let me dolly back, as they say in the trade, for a minute. Did I know we were going to talk about this? Nope.
I didn't think so.
Almost the last time I talked to anybody about anything, they surprised me with asking me about extraterrestrials and spaceships and things like that. So the assumption being that apparently if I do what I've done so far, I can't be far away from spaceships. and by extension, perhaps from punk, I don't know. But, I've often, when we were doing the Nights of Grief and Mystery, Gregory Hoskins and myself, and touring all over basically the English-speaking world, and somewhat beyond on occasion. I mean, I played in the same city in Tel Aviv, the same night as Guns N' Roses, and we may have had more fun, I don't know.
I don't doubt it.
But it was a punky club for sure, and we played our share of them. And I've been called that, strangely enough.
Not surprised, yeah.
It hasn't come across like this. You are a punk. But it's come more as adjectively speaking. You're sort of punk sensible, or punk transferable, or punk translatable in some fashion, which I knew was intended to be a radicalizing kind of compliment at the time when I was told this. And the fact that I may not have readily been able to do the transferable math didn't diminish the compliment for me for a second. No, I mean, if you are inadvertently legible to people that you wouldn't initially recognize as being of your ilk, what do you call that? I call that hallelujah moment, really.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that there's a huge... there's some comfort in generating a sort of kinship, an easy kinship experience. There's comfort to be had, and probably a sense of belonging and some merit involved. But there's a seductive element to the same thing, which is, to me, that it prompts you to speak a kind of psychic and spiritual shorthand with your confrères, right? That is, that you wouldn't go to the fence, to the wall. You wouldn't go to the edge to try to find what it is you're on about with people with whom you figure this is already, quote, common knowledge. Not only that, but if we're talking about a sense of citizenship or belonging, I'm not sure that speaking shorthand is the best service we can mete out to our troubled times.
In other words, like under the label of punk.
Well, no, I don't mean that. I mean, I'm speaking for myself now as a kind of, let's say, an outsider to what you mean by punk for the moment. Like I'm starting there, and let's see if I can walk towards what you mean, right? That's what I'm doing. So I'm saying to you now that I think that there's obvious merit to staying endogamous and speaking the shorthand and feeling the camaraderie and things of that sort. But don't forget, this is almost a 71-year-old person you're speaking to right now. So that has its limits, that has its appeal. It has a limited appeal to me now, frankly.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because I find the speaking of shorthand psychically and spiritually to be a underservice in some fashion. A kind of it's not the deepest exercise of what you're entrusted with when you're inside. When you're conducting yourself in the presence of adamant strangerhood, simply by which I mean not aggressive strangerhood, just a strangerhood that doesn't give way readily, that doesn't melt away in the appeal of some kind of, yeah, but underneath we're kind of, that sort of notion. I don't think that that's a great achievement, to diminish the strangerhood in your midst in order for you to feel more comfortable, or for them, right, the strangers, quote unquote, to feel more comfortable. I think that there's something about strangerhood that is there to draw upon the best of us.
Yeah.
And so when I was recognized as punkish from time to time, somehow that was happening. Somehow, not universally younger people, but typically people younger than I would use that adjective as a kind of, almost in an admiring way, and in a kind of extended embrace sort of a way, as if, go figure, how could that happen? But it doesn't seem in error, they would say. It seems legitimate and called for, that your life has brought you to this kind of inadvertent kinship with the likes of us. I mean, I was really gratified, and I was really honored, frankly, that I could pass, in the dark for something punk.
Well, I guess maybe one thing that I'd say, I came to your work a little too late to have experienced the Orphan Wisdom School, but I hear, because I've sat in on some conversations with you and Kimberly Johnson, that there's an unmooring that occurs for your students as you dismantle the culture. And I don't doubt that that would be true for me, but I think one of the things why I feel like I have this experience with your work, and maybe punk is just the shorthand that I reach for, is that so often I feel like you're naming something that has felt true to me for so long and that hasn't had a place in the world to feel true. Mm-hmm. And maybe the closest analog for that has been when I, along with, my fellow kind of canaries in the coal mine or something, if you will, congregated at these margins, and we tried to make something beautiful there. And, I think punk at its best was like a village project, in my experience of it. Mm-hmm. And at its worst, it's purity rights and fundamentalism and nihilism. And so I think, as I have been able to attend my experience of having been an outsider, that was part of my experience as a human here, that it wasn't an example of my having been misplaced or abandoned by the gods, but that it could potentially have some initiatory something about it. I guess what I would say is that reading your work has made me feel that was more of a possibility, that I could claim that loneliness, or I could claim that wanting to belong and not feeling like I did for such a long time as part of my my school here.
Right. Beautiful. Well, let me sort of push it a bit further on the matter of longing and belonging, if I could. Mm-hmm. I mean, belonging is such a finely spun, but not finely wrought necessarily, enterprise in the West. It's a kind of, wouldn't it be great if sigh kind of a thing, you know? In fact, we don't use the word, I mean, certainly in my company, I've rarely, if ever, heard the verb to long used in the first person. I mean, I can't think of a time when somebody zeroed in on that word to describe themselves at that moment. And it's oftentimes confused with desire, as if these are basically one and one A kind of thing, and not at all, of course. I mean, this is a long-winded thing. The short version, though, is desire has a kind of MO about it. And it goes like this. I'm really trying to stop, it says to you. Your desire says to you, you know, as soon as we find the object of our collective desire, I'm out, I'm done, I'm finished, I'll leave you alone, all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. That's the rap. And of course, you know how it works. You get sort of close to the object of your desire, and most of your desire is extinguished, but mysteriously a little bit hangs on for dear life and comes back with alarming regularity to whisper to you more or less as follows. And that was a really good try, wasn't it? We got really close that time. That was really something. And it gives you a taste for what's possible, doesn't it? But in its current incarnation, it wasn't. I think we could do better. Let's move on. And move on you do. And I'm not just speaking romantically here, but at so many levels of idea and motivation and a sense of lostness and a sense of despair. All of these things carry this desire in their pocket, you see. And how is longing in any way appreciably different? To me, it's this. Longing is not trying to stop. Longing, if you will, believes in itself. And its MO is to rise to the occasion such that you can long, you can be in the presence of what you long after and long all the more. You see now why I'm saying this to you. Apropos of what you just spoke of a few minutes ago. I understand that the inclination to speak of these things in the past tense for all kinds of chronological and, reasons, and where you are in your life reasons and other things. And of course, the so-called culture has moved on, isn't it? And all the rest. But I wouldn't be the least bit surprised that there were at least fitful encounters with the very thing that you might have wished were so. And what you might have come up against is how little deep tuition the times had provided you to inhabit the thing that you drew so close to in those days. When I say inhabit, I don't mean own or possess. I mean to be able to govern yourself in deep affirmation and affability as to the matters at hand, as to, what you were after, as to what seemed to be possible. And maybe that's not done, as in finished or extinct.
Oh, yeah.
So, go on.
So, no, I agree. I mean, I am sort of referring to it as a past tense project, but it feels very much alive to me. Yeah.
One of the things I think that happens for us North Americans, if I can use the general title there, is that we tend to equate certain kind of, let's call them psychic extremities that we either accomplish or submit ourselves to in youth, in our 20s, say. And the notion that it's not the same in your 40s and 50s, we seem to more or less readily translate as a failure of the old thing and a more realistic arrival later on. More realistic, right? More kind of settled down, more authentic in some fashion, something that's not purely buoyed up by the octane of youth, etc., and so forth, etc. You know, the things that we come to in our youth are not supposed to last in that fashion.
Right.
The sheer intensity, the kind of oblique intensity, the opacity that comes with that kind of intensity, that's a midwifery function. That's not a matrimonial function. What do you mean? I mean, those things are there as a kind of, you've heard the term, of course, rites of passage. You've got the notion of passage there. You got the notion that these things are to give way, to become a kind of radicalizing information that's temporarily persuasive in those terms. But ultimately, it's more companionship than it is persuasion. And yet, you're to bring that kind of companionship deep into the middle of your life, into the second act of your third act play called your life. That's what it's really for. And the fact that it ain't the same is like two people who've been together for 20 or 30 years, lamenting to each other or about each other.
It's not the same.
That they've changed.
That's right.
That's right.
Well, this is very potent that you say this, because I mean, it's really wonderful, I think, to encounter your book at this time, because I'm 25 years in, and not at a threshold where we're seeing our only daughter off to university. So yeah, it's changed and is changing, and yeah, I feel that very, very vividly right now.
Sure. Let me recommend, if I could, something to you.
Please.
Apropos of employing the word change here.
Okay.
I mean, I may have used it too, and if so, I'll back off and say this. I'm not sure change is the most recognition-making term to use for what we're talking about now. Change is a very neutral thing that subtly implies benefit. Right? New and improved is kind of what it sounds like out of the advertising circles, right? I don't think we're talking about change here nearly as much as we're talking about some kind of maturity.
Yeah. Okay.
And some kind of deepening.
Sounds good.
that leaves the entry level buzz where it properly belongs.
Where it belongs. Good. Yeah.
Right?
I like that.
No, you couldn't maintain that kind of stuff.
No.
Not the way you were with your kid when she was a kid.
No.
And she wouldn't take too kindly, I wouldn't think, to be treated now as if she was still 14.
No.
Just for example, it's only a few years away from probably what she is. But you take the point here. It's rather than think of it in terms purely of parenting, you could think of it in terms of your relationship as a nurturing person to the life that you were granted at the time that we're talking about, the life of your teens and your 20s, that you nurture what you're entrusted with then, the memory of it, and that you craft a language that does proper justice to how it came, how it stayed, how it went.
How it went.
Yeah.
Yeah. How it's going.
I mean, you have no obligation to the Mohawk, is what I'm saying.
Good. I don't have to do me.
But why the Mohawk? Yeah, maybe, yeah. Maybe there's a kind of sort of phenomenological kind of tribal proposition available that has nothing to do with flipping the bird to your predecessors.
Right. Yeah. No,
any longer.
It does. I don't feel that. That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. I mean, as you prepare yourself to be the predecessor in question.
No kidding. Right. Well, it's interesting. You know, I'm. Let me just look at this. Where did I put that? I sat in on the Matrimony and Patrimony, the Pillars conversations with you and Kimberly, and something that came out of that I wrote down was how the word tradition had become synonymous for everything that was wrong in the culture. And I think as a young person, as a punk, I think that would have really been resonant with me, because if tradition was the sort of starchy fundamentalist Christian upbringing, then I didn't want anything to do with that. Or if it was sort of the desolate gender dynamics that I encountered in my youth, I didn't want anything to do with that. Right. But you're talking about something so different. And I think that's like, I'd love for you to, it feels to me like I found as I was reading your book that I just kept having to go back and back. Like it's almost like my brain doesn't know how to recognize the terms that you're using without some real practice on the topic of matrimony or patrimony.
Can you think of one term you'd like us to start with?
I'd love if we would start with matrimony, actually. Yeah, there was a piece that I wrote down that you wrote. Matrimony is the workings of alchemy upon the solitary, sufficient human heart. It isn't the affirmation of human affection. It is the redemption of human affection, recasting it as spirit citizenship. I love that. It is the mother of a culture.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. It's a nice place to start.
I get all this stuff first, But I'm very pleased to be reminded that I didn't blink from time to time.
Yeah,
that's what that sounds like when
that feels pretty good.
when you train the gaze that way.
Yeah. Well, and I think just even for me, hearing for the first time this notion that patrimony was the fathering of a culture, like where maybe actually.
Well, in actual fact, you started us here the way more or less this entire proposition started for me.
Okay.
Excuse me a second. It's very hot and dry where I am right now.
I'm going to take a sip of water too.
Yeah. So I wondered a simple question. As people began to approach me in their 2s and 4s, for the possibility that I might do something real for them, that was the typical adjective that they settled upon and to describe what they were after and what they feared was not available. Something real. Something real
in terms of their
wedding ceremony.
Ceremony, yes, okay.
Wedding ceremony specifically, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I was not a stranger to this lament, of course. I'd been to the odd, quote, insufferable event known as weddings. And, it had been a while, but it's indelibly available to me. So I kind of knew what they meant, but almost the first thought that sort of arose more or less involuntarily was this. In an age that absolutely congratulates itself on its capacity for inclusivity, how has it come to pass that from time to time the various congregations could be invited to join together to attend to and otherwise witness the entrance into the holy state of matrimony of so-and-so and so-and-so? How could that come to pass with nobody batting an eye? And the corollary virtually never arise. And the corollary would be what? It would be, how come there's no notion, no place to go, no advocacy for, no lament over, no loss of, no hankering after, anything that you could call the holy state of patrimony? That's basically the starting point for me. That's how it arose. And it was not a cranky kind of hand-wringing question. It was a genuine point of serious departure. It was like the harbor. And beyond that were the rough seas of what to do about it. Yeah, that's how it began. So what did I come up with? Apropos of patrimony first, is that patrimony comes first. Oh, you mean like it always is for men? No. I didn't say anything about men, did I?
I didn't hear that.
No. The word man, there's no synonym for man in the word patrimony. Just so we're, okay, let's do the etymology for a second, in case people are getting riled up unnecessarily and shortening their lives by doing so. Just take a breath and listen for a second. Okay? It goes like this. The moni suffix, and we have quite a few words in English that have this. Alimony, alimony. So, for some reason, there's only two that are occurring to me, but there's quite ceremony.
Ceremony.
There are quite a few. Yeah. The M-O-N-Y, and I'm going to sort of poetically translate this from a dictionary, dry-ass dictionary definition. It goes something like this. Moni is the kind of repertoire or the kind of skill set, you might say, by which a particular something, usually the prefix of the word, is recognizable as itself. It's the tracks that you can follow through the wilderness or through the bush to come to an understanding of what you're dealing with in the first half of the word. Okay? So that's the moni part. And then patra. I mean, any classical scholars in the house will recognize instantly that patra is not a synonym for male or masculine or man or mankind. It's not even close to any of those things. In fact, you could go further and say patra is not really an identity at all. It doesn't refer primarily or even tangentially to your reproductive organs or system or your predilections in that regard. The word focuses around a sequence of functions, which we could call fathering. If you put them back together, patrimony is the repertoire of fathering. It's the chops, if you will, part of which seems to be sort of DNA bound, and much of it finds its expression and articulation in the world principally as a cultural value, a cultural norm, not a personal possession, a cultural requirement, if you will. So why did I say a few minutes ago that patrimony comes first? By which I meant principally chronologically. It comes first. In the advent of culture, okay? In that great scheme and swath called the advent of culture and the redemption of culture for that matter, what comes first as an act of having it be otherwise or having it be so deeply so in the example of people who are culturally accomplished? It rolls out something like this. The word patrimony virtually never appears in standard North American speech. Okay? It's a very narrowly resorted to word in anthropology and sociology, typically, and in other languages, like my wife's French Canadian, and in her French, the word patrimony appears not infrequently. And it refers to the things that a people hold most dear. Many of them of a very material nature, like
Structural.
yes, structural, absolutely. And this is what the anthropologists are referring to when they talk about material culture. They mean patrimony. So you could say then that the reason that patrimony comes first essentially is, this is going to sound very, oh boy, really old-fashioned stuff. But after all, what we're talking about is old-fashioned, literally meaning made in a bygone time. fashioned then, maybe for now. Okay? Patrimony is the repertoire, the chops, the skillfulness, the savvy, the moxie, all of those kind of subtly hued things by which the house of culture is built. The house of culture, the actual bricks and mortar of how we recognize ourselves to be ourselves and not other kinds of people. Matrimony is the chops, resources, skillfulnesses, inclinations, God-givennesses, DNA givennesses, and so on, of moving into that house to make of it a home for the most precious and the most sought after things among us. That's why it comes first. Okay? And I took my cue in this understanding from something very subtle and very simple. And it goes like this. It's more than abundantly clear, not a matter of opinion at all, that the mammalian reproductive system has, as part of its genius now, its instinctual genius, it has the capacity to discern at a chemical and alchemical level the likelihood of reproductive success given the nature of the times, given what's prevailing and what's missing in the times, okay? And it will either walk towards the possibility of procreativity, or for that month, or that season, or that year, or longer, takes a pass. So you notice I use the word genius. It's a kind of instinctive genius, and it's informed by a kind of merciful calculus. The calculus being that we want this to go well for all concerned, not just the human, for all concerned. And if the mechanics have their genius, and I think they do, and they turn the other way, then I think the hint that we must take from that is not somehow, to use an Old Testament term, infertility becomes some kind of affliction informed by the nature of the times. It's a radical kind of information instead. And it says, look now, it may come to pass that you will not procreate. So this means you will take all of the emotional energy that would have gone otherwise into parenting and so forth. And you parent the culture with the same verve, the same commitment, the same sense of obligation, same sense of impossible burden, that you've assumed, the same sense of maybe I could get it right, maybe, and so forth and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And this is a long way then of saying that if we get the notion, the actual etymology of the words right, matrimony and patrimony, then we're not going to run afoul of the gender wars that you alluded to off the top when you talked about, what you were not drawn to as a younger person and the rest. Yes, because it's not even included, it's not even hinted at in the understanding that matrimony and patrimony lends to us.
I love that. Yeah, it's such a balm. I took care of my father at the end of his life, who happened to be, he was part of but it's basically like a pretty Christian end times cult. And so getting to sort of observe the dynamics there was so, it's poignant. It's brutal. There was a strange way in which I felt like I kind of watched the women pantomime just this it was like competitive subservience.
Oh, yeah.
But it was also like, there was an interesting way in which it felt sort of like if you looked at it, they were sort of secretly the men.
The women were.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
kind of holding this control in this particular way. And also, it was just like so much, there was no, the woundedness of the men. It was just so colluded with, and they just kept pushing them to the front. Yeah, it's hard to even, I still feel like I'm unpacking it, but as I was reading what you were saying, it was such a balm to me, because that's not, there's this whole, it's new to me. I just really learned about this, which says something. There's a whole internet community called the trad wife community, where again, it's more competitive subservience, like, like I'm better at it than you other girls. Anyway, yeah, I think what I feel, you talk about, talking about the wedding ceremony, the idea of the ceremony being a severing from what is before,
right,
and a building of something different. I wonder if you might speak to that.
Well, I don't know that building it may be the best word to describe what happens.
I don't doubt that you have a better word.
Well, I don't know if I do, but I think the language is fair to us on this matter.
Okay.
Yeah. So you could say, for example, that it's not clear that matrimony is how two people feel about each other. Not ever. Here's why. The feelings that two people have for each other are what they are. And they're a marvel. And they're exceedingly compelling at various times.
At various times.
At various times and in various ways. Some of them welcome, some not so much, right? And it's a marvel of chemistry and alchemy, no doubt. And from that point of view, absolutely meant to be, part of the plan, part of the divine architecture, whatever your rendering of that notion is, I think it qualifies. It's a given, right? Here's the thing though. Matrimony doesn't say anything about wives. No. Matrimony doesn't make you a wife. Think again about the word. There's no wife equivalent in the term, right? It's the repertoire of mothering culture. That's what matrimony is. That's why we're not doing too well, because virtually nobody knows what I just said to you. And certainly nobody goes to a wedding to see to it that incrementally the culture of the day receives some kind of maternal nourishment as a result of this ceremony. Okay?
Right.
I'm saying to you
that there's a responsibility for that.
almost beyond, certainly that too.
Yeah.
But I'm suggesting to you that, okay, let me make it easy. I'm getting a little adamant here. So take a breath. I'll say it this way to you. The likelihood is that if you're invited to the usual thing, if I can just be generous and call it that, the chances are good that the invitation in question that you receive, no matter how fancy or otherwise it might be, cursive or friggin' done by crayon or anything in between, may include the following phrases or allusion to these phrases. It goes like this. Please join us for a ceremony wherein we will celebrate the love of so-and-so and so-and-so. Okay? Yeah. Sounds great. Could be great. Not likely to be great. Why not? Well, because the presumption here is that the whole thing, including all the expense, all the hangovers, all the weirdnesses, all the less than stellar speech making, all of it is predicated on something that already exists. That's what it's all there for. It's a rubber stamp. Right. It's an imprimatur. It just goes on the paper, and it says these people now will take their place as fully achieved practitioners of the thing they said in the course of their 15-minute wedding.
Right.
Okay, you see why I'm saying this to you in this way?
I do.
Because there's a difference between promises and vows, aren't there? You know there are. Instinctively, you can feel the difference. The gravitational pull around the word vow is very particular. Mm-hmm. There's no resemblance to promises. Mm. So what's wrong with the celebration of love thing? I didn't say there's anything wrong with it. I just said, don't go to the hardware store for bread. Mm-hmm. What I'm saying is, put the emphasis on the right syllable here. What do you mean? I mean, a ritual is not there to certify or sanctify something that already exists. A ritual is there alchemically to conjure something virtually from nothing.
Right.
Okay? That's what it's for. That's what the ritual of that precedes matrimony is for. That's why you're not promising. That's why nobody says at the front of picture this. Can you picture the celebrant, the officiant? Unfortunate sounding word, but anyway, the officiant at the front of the room. Can you picture them saying, now, do you promise? And then fill in all of either the very traditional things that are said or even the alternative self-penned stuff. Can you picture it going like this? That the person who's being asked this says, well, now that you mention it, sounds a little daunting. And I don't know that I've ever done the likes of this before, what you're talking about. Certainly not with this person, or certainly not for very long.
Not very long.
So I'm thinking that if you give me the benefit of the doubt, I'll try really hard and we'll see how it goes. Mm-hmm. And you picture anybody sitting in the pews looking at each other going, well, that sounds pretty good. Can you picture anybody at the front of the room going, well, okay, well, I haven't heard it like that way before, but at least it's honest. No, nobody would let that go.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay? If that's what promises are. Promises are about what you might do, what you mean to do, which on a good day you could do, but nobody really knows. Okay? It literally means I'm talking to you now about the future.
Yeah.
That's why they don't call them promises, because a conjuring moment is not predicated on the oncomingness of the future. The conjuring moment is predicated on the present. Any transformation that's going to happen has got to happen now, while the witnesses are here, while the tension is high, where the mojo is in the room, where the ancestors have been summoned or not, much more typically, where the dusty rafter dwellers are looking down from on high, etc., and so on, okay? And that's why in those moments, typically now, what word do we use as allegedly as a synonym for promise? And of course, it's not a synonym at all. And the answer is vow. That's what we call it then. And it's virtually the only time that card-carrying English-speaking people will use the word vow to describe anything. That word simply is not employed to describe really any other undertaking. And I would just say to you by concluding this rant here, that the difference between the two is not really the tense thing, even though they will say to you at the front of the room, not will you, not can you, not should you. They say, do you? Right now, do you? But even that's not the biggest thing. The biggest thing is to recognize that what you're called here and what you've gathered these other people around for is to mean into existence something that has so far escaped you, which means that you could get it wrong, which means it could go sideways. It could mean your aim is off or no good at all. It could mean you've got no education on these matters at all. It could mean you didn't read Jenkinson's book. It could mean Jenkinson didn't write a book and it's not a good enough book. It could mean all of that and more, you see. So ritual fundamentally employs the high wire act of making vows to act upon the love that two people claim to have for each other long enough to leach some of that energy and that kind of inward looking sensibility and turn it towards the world.
Turn it towards the world.
Towards the world, to see if the world can be that allegedly better place as a consequence of you laying claim to this little bit of happiness.
I mean, I love that. I mean, I feel some emotion. I love that. As you said that, I could picture that so ritualized couple turning towards the world, being held.
As they do so.
As they do so, and that there would be a reciprocity involved there. And instead, I think so many of us are like what we learned or what we're trying to unlearn is a sort of siloing and solving our problems inside. Or I just love the way that marries the couple, but it also weaves them into something larger than themselves. It just doesn't feel like that is part of the wedding ritual at all now.
No, indeed. Think of this for a moment, a very simple kind of integer of what you've just so well described. Depending on the culture and the time, but any culture that's not been overwhelmed by modernity tended to practice the following. People had a certain repertoire of dress available to them as young people and as single people. When they married, you could tell from a distance if this person was married or not. They dressed their vows. See what I mean? Why? I mean, if you just get past for 5 minutes the notion of ownership of one human being by another, branding, all of that ungiving take on things, and credit the distinct possibility that sometime before your own crazy moment of hypercriticism today, there were people from time to time who got it absolutely right. Okay. And one of the indicators that got absolutely right is the following: that you could tell from a distance that people were married because their status in life had changed, because it was proper that they looked the part so they could grow into the part, you see. That is the nature of dressing up, after all. Intuitively, don't we know that? That when you dress up, does it not seem to ask something of you that the quote ordinary clothes may not? You can feel it. Of course you can. You can feel that you're showing a high amount of regard for the event by dressing in this fashion, and a host of other things we don't need to talk about right now. So what a beautiful thing that your fundamental change in life has style attached to it, which you don't have to invent, which you can acquire. And only then can you acquire it. It's something like at the end of your apprenticeship in the old days, your journeyman's papers. You're familiar with the term, the idea?
I don't know journeyman's, no.
Oh, you'll love this.
Okay, give it to me.
Okay, so this is, let's use the example of woodworkers, framers, people with those kind of skills. So in the old days, you would learn this work not by being taught it, but by working on the work site in the most menial fashion for quite a long time, presuming that you're paying attention, that the real instruction is indirect. It's the practice that you're being let in on by being, pushing the broom, so to speak. Okay. Now, this lasts a period of time, often agreed upon. At the end of I've forgotten the word. What was it?
Journeyman.
No, the apprenticeship. At the end of the apprenticeship, people are formally turned out of the shop, out of the master's workplace. Okay. And they're obliged to turn their trade as best as they're able to and complete their sentimental education by losing the nurturing environment of the apprenticeship and trading it in for service in the wider world. It's a beautiful understanding. So you're literally being employed to go on a journey, leave the old familiarities behind. If that's true as a way of acquiring a skillfulness that's really important in the world, building good buildings, good houses, and the rest, then you could imagine that some similar understanding would serve our convictions about what it means to grow older, what it means to have skillfulness that the world deserves from you and needs from you, that you're not in it for self-improvement or self-direction or really much of anything. You're there to democratize the skillfulness and the wisdom that was made available to you as a younger person. That's the midpoint of your life. That's what it's for. So this informs our understanding of matrimony and patrimony. This kind of time limitedness, this sense that you're in a time of your life now that asks things of you, that you don't get a vote on. Finally, rather than use the word tradition, think of the word formality. This is a word that nobody thinks very highly of anymore. I've never heard anybody use the word formality in an admiring sense of the term. But I would like to invite you and the people listening to consider the following. That formality, like journeymanhood, like apprenticeship, like being single and then not being single, these things have a repertoire that comes with the territory. Okay? It's not your repertoire. No, you won't feel like yourself. No, this is not part of your self-expression. That's not what it is. It's formal mercy. Okay, formalities of the kind we're talking about now are structural mercy in a working culture. And the particular mercy I'm thinking of is when you engage in formality, you are rescued from the awkward, stumbling, over-reliance upon autobiography. You are lent the skillfulness of former generations in formality.
You relent to the skillfulness of former generations.
And the skillfulness is lent to you.
It's lent to you back.
Right. Not so lonely anymore, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sweet. I saw an article recently about AI romantic partners, and the idea of friction came to mind, like that there's just no friction in that kind of exchange. It's sort of a creation of some kind of algorithm that mirrors back whatever thing.
Yeah. Because it's not an exchange.
This is not an exchange, yes.
But not a partnership.
It's not. I mean, it's heartbreaking and it's queasy making, and
there's nobody there.
And it feels like such a manifestation of the self-obsessions that are driving everyone so bananas right now.
It's how you marry yourself.
Yeah. And I think about part of what I feel you articulate so, I mean, there's so many things I feel like that just, again, it's like fishing an ember out of an almost dead fire and then just breathing life on them. And it's, it's so new to wonder about in these ways, and it feels very familiar in others. But that idea of the friction, of difference, of two people coming together, not to sort of transform the other person into a version of themselves, but that those differences are needed and can be nurtured by matrimony.
Employed by matrimony.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely employed.
Mm-hmm.
There's no obligation to have two sets of the same thing. I mean, think when people play house now, okay, what ends up happening is for the longest time, they have at least two of everything in the house, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody knows how it's going to work, right? So nobody's letting go of their stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you got two couches, you're trying to make that work. You got two sets of bedding, you're trying to make that work. You get the idea.
Yeah, you want to hold on to both sets of all your records just in case.
Just in case.
Uh-huh.
Just in case. This is your prenup minus the nup.
Yep.
That's what it is. See,
Uh-huh.
that is what David Bowie called modern love, is it not? That's the pinky swear with the fingers crossed behind the back.
That's right.
I mean, I don't say that cynically. I mean, I genuinely think that's what's going on there. The notion that you have no obligation to go, quote, all in. None.
Yeah.
It's foolish to go all in. It's foolish, to rely upon somebody, to be dependent and all the rest. So the notion is that somehow you can maintain yourself, not just the best of yourself, but as much of yourself as you want to retain. And then whatever's left over, you can mingle that on the periphery with the minglings of the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, can you not smell some quality of bad faith that basically hovers around the thing?
Yeah, it's backdoor, having backdoor access, something a way to slip out.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. How about this? Two things. One is about blessing, which I'll talk about in a second. And then this matter that we're talking about now. I submit to you, it's going to sound cranky, probably. It goes like this. Marriage should be a lot harder to get into, legally speaking and morally speaking, and a lot easier to get out of than it is.
Huh.
Why? Because of what we've just been talking about. Because the entrance into it should be so acutely attenuated to what's at stake that you should have second thoughts and cold feet and so on and so on and so on ongoingly.
Mm-hmm.
So that it almost becomes a kind of condition wherein you get to wonder to yourself, do you really mean it with this person then?
And you were talking about before the ceremony.
Yeah, before the ceremony, of course.
Yeah.
And the ceremony becomes a manifestation of this deep second thought choreography, really.
Mm.
That's the first thing. The second thing, apropos blessing, is this. Of course, it's an old tradition. It's a tired old thing that virtually nobody believes in, but they may do it once for the sake of a tradition they don't understand. And it goes like this. Maybe somebody's got to ask somebody for their blessing on this thing. Now, traditionally, who's supposed to ask who? But let's just leave that aside for a moment and just say, how about somebody ask somebody? Wouldn't that be something? They ask them for their blessing. Oh, what does it mean? Well, it means you just ask them to say yes to your stuff. What? Yeah, that's what it is. You're just asking for somebody's sort of blanket
agreement,
uncritical approval. That's what you're after. Until you do the etymology on the word. And then you realize, oh Lord, there's absolutely no reliance upon approval of any sort. Okay, go ahead, wise guy. What does it mean? Answer is, it's an old Anglo-Saxon word, the pronunciation of which has thrown us slightly off kilter or off the scent, because it means basically to bloody.
I was a little stunned to read that.
Yeah, it means to bloody.
Yeah.
Okay, so in other words, if you seek blessing, you're seeking the formal execution of former things. Okay, you're seeking an end, a formally recognizable and enforceable ending to certain ways of life, certain MOs, certain prejudices, orientations to things, certain, anyway, you sort of get the notion here. So if you're asking that of someone, you're asking that they preside over the ending of most of the person you were that got yourself into this scene called marrying in the first place. That's what you're asking for. No wonder nobody asked for it.
Yeah.
Mind you, if you figure you're great just the way you are, why would you ask for anybody's blessing, right?
Right.
Why would you?
Not very many people do anymore.
Oh, indeed. And I think this is one of the reasons why, because we imagine ourselves to be unto ourselves a little slice of more or less perfection, just as we are. And the wedding thing is simply there to do two things: to get that recognized, overtly, and to add to it where advisable, and to augment it by stuff from the other person. Basically, that's it. So in actual fact, seeking after blessing is an acknowledgement that your life as you've known it ought not to continue in this way. No judgment, no condemnation, but discernment for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, and as you say that, I can feel how many people straddle their former lives.
Sure.
Yeah.
Somebody should write a book.
Yeah, that's right. I was charmed by the Leonard Cohen quote that you included. Oh, yes. May I read that?
Sure, please.
He said, I think marriage, sorry, I need my glasses for this. This is small print. I think marriage is the hottest furnace of the spirit today, much more difficult than solitude, much more challenging for people who want to work on themselves. It's a situation in which there are no alibis, excruciating most of the time.
He's got to add to that, he's got a line in one of his songs called, I think it's called Democracy. And the line he uses is, he refers to the homicidal bitchin' that goes down in every kitchen to determine who cook and who will eat. That's pretty unrelenting, isn't it? He didn't blink on that one.
Well, and it's funny. I just, not that long ago, I read a biography of him, the Sylvie Simmons one. And I found myself again confronting some of my own monastic fantasies that I will indulge in from time to time. So I appreciate it. I mean, I think that the furnace feels real to me, the gifts of it, and then also just, I think the appreciation of it, just that it takes time, that it really takes time to, you got to kind of stay to find out.
Takes time to appear.
Takes time to appear, if that's the way to say it. Yeah.
Go further and say, what's there takes time to appear.
Yeah. That's the truth.
Well, have you got a doozy of a question with which we could close the proceedings for now?
Well, not written down. I think the book of yours that I've spent the most time with is Come of Age. It's quite underscored and underlined. And I think about that possibility of elderhood as it presents itself in matrimony, as you describe it. Like, who presides over it? Let me see. Sorry. I think one of the reasons why that book moved me so much is because I feel like that was this thing that I was so longing for, just to encounter somebody in the world that felt like they had that stature, that felt like the real thing. I think it was more the case that I encountered people who were older but not elders, and who, I think this is maybe like at the heart of the punk rebellion is to encounter people who are older than you telling you what to do and having a sneaking suspicion that they haven't really considered the questions very much themselves. But how does matrimony prepare us to become elders?
I don't know that prepare would be the right understanding of what's going on there. The notion of preparedness sounds a little bit like an insurance policy of sorts, right? That you go through the right steps and there's certain inevitability of improvement is at hand kind of thing. No, you could say this. You got to work backwards from what you mean by elder, of course, to make this answer and this question really hang together well. But briefly, for the moment, I'd say something like this. Elderhood is crafted in hindsight. Elderhood is not something you deliberately amass and choreograph internally or otherwise, ongoingly, observing yourself in the act of doing so.
I'm becoming an elder.
Yeah, look at me, like eldering as we
successfully doing my practices.
So I would say it's unbecoming of an elder to prepare him or herself for elderhood. Okay. So then you come by it otherwise. Principally, you come by it, you'll recognize this from line of inquiry from the book. You come to it because people come to you seeking it out.
Right.
You see, this is where the summons begins to lay claim upon you. Yes. And certain something begins to arise.
Yes.
So you can feel already, wow, so the self-determination, yeah, not so much. Well, the kind of self-directedness, no, not that either. Well, shit, you mean you just kind of hang around like a bad smell looking out the window until somebody half your age kind of, yeah, you're starting to get it now. But wait, what if they never come? Okay, very good. What if they never come? Okay, here's my answer. And it's not going to feel comforting, but there's something in it. Question is this. What would the last elder do upon recognition of their last elder status? My answer would be the last elder would ready themselves for the elder. To become an elder? No. The last elder would ready themselves to craft, to participate in, to conjure, to recognize, to give voice to and give merit to the oncomingness of an elder. Yeah, but you just said they're the last elder. I know. Do you want an answer or don't you? I'm giving you an answer. It is in the work of an elder, be they the last one or the first one or somewhere in between, that they not construct their understanding around the advent of this skillfulness in them. they would recognize that the way that elderhood is called up in the culture is that it's called up in the culture. And the elders do the calling too, you see, but not to themselves, not to each other, like in an assisted living arrangement, nothing like that. That they call the culture to some kind of readiness for the advent of elderhood. And in so doing, watch this, and in so doing, the institution of elderhood is quietly reconstituted.
Mm.
Wow. For real? Absolutely for real.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Stephen, I'm so grateful to have the time with you. I appreciate you so much. And
I've enjoyed this very much, and
I'm so glad to hear
it. Yeah, I especially appreciate you getting nervy and asking.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yes. I'll be there on the 10th for the book event. I look forward to it. Yeah. And just blessings on your way with this book. And thank you again. Thank you again so much for your wake in the world.
Okay.
Take care.
Well yourself.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.